Men are good, as are you. Men are good, as are you, and welcome to the Engineered Fatherlessness Creates Chaos, Part 3. Now, there's 3 parts. The third one today is going to be the last one, and the first one was just, what is this thing called fatherlessness? What's it about? The second one was looking into feminism and how they've built bureaucracies over the years that have been injurious to men. Why injurious to men? Why did they want to destroy the American family? Because they thought that women could not be whole human beings until they were out of the grasp of the father-driven American family. And so they did their best to try and dump dads. And, you know, look at it. The heavy lifting was done by the family court system and with an assist from the domestic violence industry. And men have just been torn apart. It's just a mess. But today we're going to talk about the domestic violence industry and how feminists got where they got. And a lot of it was through lies. We're going to be talking about the lies. We're going to talk about the foundational lies. We're going to talk about the research lies. And we're going to talk about the media lies. And we're not going to get to all of the lies. So if you know of lies we've missed, put them in the comments below, because there's a lot of them out there. And we're not going to claim to even come close to covering all of them. But I think after you watch this, you'll have a general sense of how they used untruth, immorally, to create a bureaucracy. Now let's get started with the first one, the foundational lies. Okay, so we're going to have to ask you to imagine something. I want you to imagine that you're working for a company, and the company goes out and evaluates families, right? Goes out and evaluates families. So you're going out to evaluate families, and the family you're doing that particular day, you went out there, and the mother was drunk all the time. She was a mess. And she beat the kids. She was abusive to the children. And she was not real nice to the husband either. She was, throwing things at him, doing this and doing that. It was just a mess. It was chaos for everybody, right? So you see this, and you go back to your company, and they say, okay, how did it go with the Smiths? What would it take for you to turn a blind eye to that woman's violence? What would it take? Money? I'll bet most of you, they couldn't pay you enough to lie about that, right? I mean, it's just the people would feel a moral sense to tell the truth and to protect those kids and to protect the husband and to help the wife get out of her problem, right? I mean, that's what you would think people would want to do. And to do anything otherwise, I think, would be considered highly immoral. Okay, so enter Ellen Pence. Ellen Pence was a woman who was instrumental in the creation of the Duluth model. She wrote 2 books on domestic violence. She was around in the beginnings of this whole thing. And I read one of her books, and man, it's so male unfriendly, I could hardly get through the thing. Anyway, there's Ellen. And Ellen gives us a clue about how they got started with feminism and domestic violence. Look at this quote from Ellen. In many ways, we turned a blind eye to many women's use of violence, their drug use and alcoholism, and their often harsh and violent treatment of their own children. What? She's telling us that the foundation of the feminist domestic violence movement was based on lies. It was based on not telling people about the woman's violence, only talking about the men as being the violent ones. Would you say that's immoral? I would. I would say it's highly immoral. And guess what? If you look at most of the dictionaries, how do they define evil? They say evil is when someone is highly immoral. So I think a good case could be made to say that the feminists were basically pretty much evil in what they did with domestic violence. And that's just the underlying stuff. I mean, the whole thing. Look at what they did to Erin Pizzey, for crying out loud. I mean, they killed her dog. They canceled her in so many ways, just knocked her off the face of the earth because she claimed that women were just as violent as men. So, this is a bad start. When you start building things with lies, you're not going to go anyplace positive. Anyway, let's go to the next piece. The research lies. Man, this is hard to stomach because you think of research and the whole country thinks of research as being, oh, if the research says this, it must be true, right? No, 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 and no. And we'll see why. But the research piece, first thing you need to know is in 1984, the Attorney General of the United States did a task force on family violence. This is 1984, 10 years before the VAWA. And what did they conclude from this? What did they conclude? Look at this. Family violence occurs in this country in staggering proportions. Each year, thousands of men, women, and children must deal with the tragedy of family violence. And then there was another one. Other matters of presentation should be clarified. Both men and women are victims and perpetrators of family violence. Okay. And more and more and more. 1984, the Attorney General of the United States is saying that domestic violence goes both ways. It's both men and women who are perpetrators and victims. But by 1994, we got problems. We got some problems. And here's the first problem. Physical Violence in American Families, written by Murray Straus and Richard Gellis, was a 1975 survey, I think, that looked at lots of families and came to some conclusions about what's wrong and what kind of violence takes place in these families. Oh, boy. And so the feminists took one stat out of that study. Feminists took one stat that 1.8 million women were battered, which translated to one woman being battered every 17.7 seconds. Okay. And if you go on any search engine on the internet and type in 1.8 million women were battered, see how many links come up. Lots and lots and lots of links come up. Because that has been turned into a myth. It's been turned into something that just is gospel, right? But guess what? Here's the kicker. Here's the kicker. But wait, the same report said that 2.6 million men had been battered, and that meant that a man was battered every 14.6 seconds. What? The same study. So what did they do? They turned a blind eye to that part of the research. They only told you about the women part. This was in preparation for moving into VAWA, right? They lied about the stats. They lied about that. Well, they didn't lie. They said the study did say that 1.8 million women were battered. That's true. But they omitted the part about the men. And this is not the only time they do this. We'll get to the other times they do this in just a minute. But the Murray Straus, a respected researcher in family violence, wrote an article, a journal article, on how the feminists lie. Now, he didn't say that. He said how they spread misinformation. But basically, he was saying how they lie. And he listed 7 ways that the feminists lie in doing their research. Can you believe it? Suppress evidence, avoid obtaining data inconsistent with the patriarchal dominance theory, cite only studies that show male perpetration, conclude that results support feminist beliefs when they do not. Oh, and my favorite, create evidence by citation. They would do an article in a journal, right? And they'd say, well, such and such study shows that women are never victims of or never perpetrators of domestic violence. But if you go to that little link about that study that they talked about, it's about beekeeping. I mean, it's about something completely other than what they claim it was. This is just lying, folks. Just crazy. And I did an article, actually, it's on Men Are Good, just on Straus's 7 things and what he said. It is just a beautiful article, and it's very important that we have a look at that. So then, right before, actually, this is after VAWA. I think this is Shaden's work was in 98, was it? I think about 4 years after VAWA. Prevalence, incidence, and consequences of domestic violence against women. Findings from the National Violence Against Women Survey. So they did a survey, and what did they come up with? Oh my gracious goodness. They came up with women, 1.3 million women are victims of domestic violence. And you look at that stat, go to the search engine, type in 1.3 million women are victims of domestic violence, and see how often that comes up in your search engines. But look at this little thing here. It shows, you can see the physical assault. You know, and you go over to women. It says women 1.3 million. But then there's a column that says men. Men, 834,000 men were victims of domestic violence. The same study, the same chart, but they only tell you one little slice of it. That's lying, folks. That's just lying. And this is how they've created lies in order to push their agenda, in order to get more money to build bigger bureaucracies to tell more lies. Because what do they do with the bureaucracies? Oh my gosh, they get, $1.8 billion from VAWA. And what do they use a lot of that money for? To do workshops, training judges and policemen and whoever's and therapists all about, quote, domestic violence, their idea about domestic violence. And then they have this thing where they send in family courts, they send in an observer, right? If someone's in family court for domestic violence stuff, they have an observer there, but there's nobody who helps the man, but there's someone who helps the woman, right? Anyway, they did this stuff over and over again. Yeah, so let's move on from there. That's enough research lies, and there were plenty of them. But let's move a little farther. Oh my gosh. The Super Bowl in 1993. Talk about lying. People remember this one? The Super Bowl hoax. Yes, it was indeed a Super Bowl hoax. Oh my gosh. The women had this news conference the week before the Super Bowl. You know how the week before the Super Bowl there's all kinds of news stuff. Well, they had it in Pasadena, which was where the 93 Super Bowl is going to be. So there's lots of media around, lots of media. And just everybody's, looking for things to find out about. So they have this news conference, and they announced that 40% more women would be battered on Super Bowl Sunday. It's the most dangerous day of the year for women. Huh? Oh, boy. Most dangerous day of the year for women. Right. And they had part of their press conference was women's groups. They had this fairness and accuracy in reporting person there who was the head of that, I think. And so everyone believed him. They believed this. 40% more women would be battered on Super Bowl Sunday. The whole thing about violent game of football and men, they get violent too, and they're going to take it out on their wives and children. And there's these terrible men. That's what they're trying to do. They're trying to paint men as being awful and women as being victims. And they painted it really well, because guess what happened after this news conference? Everybody out there starts printing articles about, oh no, the Super Bowl is the most dangerous day in the world for women. La, 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 la. Just crazy crap over and over again, right? So the next day, the Fairness and Accuracy in Reporting, which was the feminist agency to what do you call them, publicists, they sent out this mailing, a mass mailing, telling women that, oh no, be careful, stay home on Super Bowl Sunday, or don't stay home on Super Bowl Sunday. Get out of the house because you may be beaten otherwise. Oh, God. It's just lie after lie after lie, but everyone ate it up. Everyone except for a man named Ken Ringel, who was a Washington Post reporter at the time. And Ringel came up with this idea, this fascinating idea that a journalist should check out the sources. So he started checking the sources. What did he find? Every source he checked said, I didn't say that. My research didn't say that. They quoted this research from Dominion University in Virginia, that they had been a part of this. And the researchers said, no, we never said that. And the more he went back, the more they backed up and said, no, we never said that. So when feminists get called out for lying, what happens? Do they say, oh, we're sorry. We made a mistake there. We'll go back and make it right. We'll let people know that was a mistake. No! What do? They attack. They attacked Ringel. They attacked Christina Hoff Sommers, who did some wonderful work in trying to find out exactly what happened with this. And she, if you search that on the internet, you'll find a great, in fact, it's a part of her book, the Who Stole Feminism book. Is all about, one chapter is about the whole Super Bowl hoax, which is fascinating. But it just tells you more and more about the lies that these people tell. Oh, and of course, you probably remember the lies about 22 to 35% of injuries to women are due to domestic violence. Remember that one? Of course, that was completely bogus. You know, completely crazy bogus. And then the one about, what was it? 25% of all ER admissions for women are due to domestic violence. And then the one about more women are injured from domestic violence than all car accidents, rapes and muggings or something like that. I mean, it's just lie after lie after lie. And what happens? Our gynocentric culture eats it up. We eat it up, and guess what? The legislators ate it up and gave them $1.8 billion for domestic violence with the VAWA bill. Even though we knew, the government knew, that it was both men and women who were perpetrators and victims of domestic violence, they created this bill, the VAWA, Violence Against Women Act. And it's interesting, a part of the reason that they think that happened was because the Clarence Thomas hearings were just before it, and the senators had taken a terrible beating as being sexist and not really sensitive to women's pain. So they all bent over backwards to be sensitive and to give more money. Oh, can we do this? Can we do that? Oh, great, googly moogly. Anyway, so that's how they made their bureaucracy. That's how they created things. So anytime you see domestic violence work, know that the underlying stuff is just built on lies. It's goopy. We need to stop this. I mean, this is immoral. This is evil. This is evil. It's hurting the children, it's hurting the men, and it's hurting the women too, who are the perpetrators, because they don't get a chance really to get out of that and to get some good therapy. Anyway, on that happy note, that's the end of part 3. And keep in mind that men are good, as are you. And come see me on Patreon. We're having a good time on Patreon. There's a good group of men there, and we meet every Sunday. And come join us. So you all take care, and we'll see you soon. Men are good. Men are good, as are you.